First, I would like to say that everybody is trying to improve innovation to address a fast-moving and unpredictable world. My presentation aligns with this, so today I will share my perspective on texture design in the context of the innovation process and the role of disruptive technology as we try to ride the wave of Industry 4.0. When developing a new product, we pay special attention to the attributes of texture. Why? These attributes define the eating experience and drive consumer choices. Texture is also important to the defining process, a product's shelf life, and even resource management. In recent years, consumers are more and more attracted to attributes of texture as assessed by claims on the front of packaging. Please take a look at this chart on the left. As you can see, a survey found that more than 50% of bakery and snack products launched in the US make texture claims. The top 4 terms are soft, moist, crunchy, and crispy. Here we have soft bread, moist cake, crunchy granola bars, and crispy rice cakes. Another survey shows that at least 20% of all new salad dressings make claims as well. These claims create experience expectations for the consumer. By far, creamy was the most popular descriptor used, followed by smooth, thick, and silky. So, what do we do with popular textures? They need to be translated into precise, measurable, and actionable terms for food designers. This picture shows how complex our sensory perception system is. On the left, we can see it is comprised of 5 sensory centers in the brain. On the right, we can see nerve connections that transmit the perceptions of food in your mouth and nose to your brain, where it processes your preferences. Research has shown that our food preferences are often more dependent on how the food feels in our mouths, rather than on how it tastes or smells. This sensation is called mouthfeel, and is related to the texture of the food. Texture is a multi-parameter attribute. When we express it, we use sensory terms. Our first impression of food is always related to mechanical characteristics. Popular terms are arising, such as brittle, firm, crumbly, chewy, soft, thin, and so on. We also perceive geometrical characteristics, for example, grainy, cellular, fibrous, and coarse, etc. Other characteristics such as moisture and fat content are also put into words like dry, moist, greasy, oily, and so on. Now, let's talk about how texture design is involved in 3 main categories of the product development initiative. First is developing a new product to achieve the desired target. 60-degree egg is the best example. They found that both time and temperature determine the final texture of eggs. Experiments were performed at a wide range of temperatures and varying times. Then they plotted the viscosity as a function of the heating time at a constant temperature. At the same time, they collected the viscosities of other products. Thus, they were able to develop a reference library of textures, which can be used as a tool to help describe the texture of a cooked egg yolk. Say you want the yolk texture to be similar to mayonnaise. This reference helps the chef come up with the exact time and temperature combination needed. The second category is building back the texture of an existing product. One of our projects developed a fish gel for elderly people. Here, a plot of shear viscosity by chewing cycle shows how the structures of commercial products collapse. We want the texture of our product to fall within this range. The approach we used to fine-tune the texture used a type of fat anhydric colloid. The use of liquid fat anhydric colloid has an implication on our approach to the mouthfeel of our gel. Shown here is a plot of friction factor by sliding speed. The dark blue line represents our new formula, which shows the structure has a higher friction value than the control. The third category is transforming the texture to one desired by the target consumers. People love variety. On the left, you can see a company exploit the melting properties of fats in designing the texture and mouthfeel of chocolate, so consumers experience several sensations in just one package. Another approach is to change the form. The picture on the right shows a traditional product with a new structure. Plum sauce, sweet black soy sauce, and soybean paste were made into frozen desserts. These desserts cultivate a sublime synergy between taste, mouthfeel, and temperature. Their textures range from the graininess of a Slurpee to the creaminess of an ice cream. Texture design is a kind of mirror innovation process, which requires the proper mindset, skill set, and tool set. In an organization, everybody is asked to contribute. However, their efforts are not unified. We need a systematic process. These days, you might have heard a lot about design thinking. Let's call it DT, for short. DT is everywhere. It's fundamentally the same concept that people express differently. DT is a mindset, composed of creativity, collaboration, and empathy, that should be exercised within each step of the innovation process, defining, acting, and reflecting. DT focuses on designing for new experiences. A typical method of DT is to bring people with different backgrounds together to tackle a complex problem. A critical step is defining a user persona. These pictures are from a workshop I attended in 2016. We tried to create a smart food for aging people. DT is not a structured process. We adapt the proper mindset and approach for a particular situation. Our concept was transformed into a prototype. Here we have crispy mushrooms and a tofu jelly with coconut oil sauce using starch modifying technology. We can view DT as a complementary process to innovation, but not a prerequisite. Every school of design would say, form follows function. Let's design the necessary function and the form will follow. On the left is a concept for a 100% plant-based vegan product. From there, a rice-based mayonnaise was launched in 2 forms. In contrast, the School of Innovation would say, form follows funding. The more money you have, the better the project can be because you can go around the cycle. We want to do this as many times as possible. Nevertheless, common to both ways of thinking are 3 interrelated factors: the human side, the business side, and the technical side. Adopting a DT mindset will accelerate your innovation. But when working with multiple parameters, empathy alone can't get it right, especially for the challenging concept of personalized food. Based on an empirical observation, people are in love with textures that can be characterized as crispy, crunchy, tender, juicy, and firm, whereas textures such as tough, pasty, lumpy, slimy, and crumbly are often regarded as undesirable. This brings us to another important question: what drives their preferences? That is to say, what physical or subjective variables appear to co-vary with preferences, as shown on the left. A direct way is to find the drivers by asking respondents to rate the relative importance of different attributes. Let's say I ask you to rate how well you like the taste of your morning coffee relative to how well you like the whole cup of coffee overall. The problem is, people do not really know what is important, the relative importance of overall preference, and so it's difficult to go into specific aspects of texture. We cannot easily dive into the subconscious of the consumer, but the reality is that we don't have to. Consider taking a more productive approach, as shown on the right by looking at the pattern of the ratings. To get this surface, you can present the consumer with a set of similar products and obtain sensory space, where the optimum level often lies. Then, create a comprehensive model, showing several sensory attributes as drivers of preference. Texture can be classified into 3 categories. First are the fundamental instrumental measurements, the outermost layer, for example, shear stress, hardness, deformability, and so on. Second are the fundamental sensory terms, the next 2 layers, and third are the integrated consumer terms, the innermost layer. The ability to understand this relationship and use it to change the texture of food by design can lead to the perfect texture, as illustrated at the center of the graphic. Another application is to translate the eating experience from inside out into measurable and, ultimately, controllable attributes that can be optimized to design the perfect texture. This has to use consumer focus groups to define the attributes consumers prefer. If a consumer mentions crunchy, you have to ask, what does that term really mean to them? Then, instrumental texture terms are defined and food scientists can manipulate the texture to achieve the target. Now, Let's revisit the question why we need to design and innovate. It's because there is an inflection in the food industry that is driven by the internet. Around the 1960s to the 1990s, the only place you could buy food was in a supermarket, right? And consumer packaged goods, or CPG, of large companies usually occupy the majority of the space. Now that food is being sold online, the game has changed. People can sell directly to consumers online. They can market their products on sites like Facebook and YouTube. You have a tidal wave of these great innovative niche brands that can really target consumers in a much more nuanced way. This inflection forces companies, both big and small, to have a more nuanced understanding of consumers. Important technology disruptions. As a consequence of the internet, are artificial intelligence and machine learning, AI and ML. They are adding value to product development and sensory evaluation, and are empowering food companies to better understand consumer preferences. Food and beverage companies are also typically among the least prepared to exploit the powers of AI and ML. Why? Because of deficiencies in the raw material required by those technologies. In other words, in the data to crunch, massage, and extrapolate from. The Internet of Things, or IoT, captures information about human and food interaction. In the picture shown here, I participated in a 3 bits in 1 bite Intel event, helping figure out the best combinations of texture and taste. You can tell that a lot of data were generated for free. I didn't ask, but I believe they use video and sensors, from the time I entered, to collect my facial expressions and body language. This concept has been around for a while and has been adopted in the restaurant scene, as well as in services like this, developed by KMUTT. Consumer behavior, observed through body language, doesn't lie. AI can interpret preference scores compared with their previous data set and then come up with a recommendation for customer satisfaction. The development of AI also helps to save a budget on sensory panel. The app, developed by startup Flavor Wiki, asks untrained testers to enter their input on taste using smartphones, tablets, or PCs. Then the app asks the testers to choose between 2 attributes, rather than having to rank them. For example, in this picture, the app asks, which flavor is more intense in this yogurt? The results compare your profile to the average. Here we get an individual sensory profile shown as a box plot. The stars show your sensitivity toward certain attributes, relative to others. The more data collected, the smarter the app gets. The app can then classify your target customer based on demographics and lifestyle. Consumer preference is not only based on learned behavior, but also on physiology. A precise texture design needs to link a consumer's eating capability with the food structure. The graph here relates EC scores to food consistency from level 1 to 5, less complex to more complex. This will give us an idea of what ingredients and processing technologies to use. These 2 approaches combined help you predict and design texture in a more personalized way. I've covered the bases and tools needed to capture consumer preference. The key is to understand consumer personas. Their preferences differ based on physiology and frame of reference. Thanks to digital transformation, we are able to move beyond our previous limitations in articulating how we perceive the features of a product. AI and ML, although still immature in the food and beverage industry, will definitely add value to food design. However, there is still an important question to address. What is the best approach for your business? I'd like to leave you with 2 points. 1. Depending on your resources, especially your time and budget, diversified approaches work best. Try to repeat the innovation process as many times as needed. 2. Texture is an important part of the eating experience. Its design process requires systematic thinking as well as keen observation of consumer persona. So keep your eyes open. View everything around you as an opportunity to create and innovate.